having you on this conference today. First of all, we're talking about the way Twitter and Facebook and all the social media changed the way journalism work. What is your experience in the American media? How do they cope with Twitter, and did it change the way journalists work with their media?
Danke. De Frage vielleicht ist vorab nach für den Journalisten? Vielleicht nicht. Does news need us journalists? Well, in some ways, no, it doesn't. And I think that's part of what Twitter shows us. The lesson that I've learned lately is from Andy Carvin at NPR, and I presume you all have followed Andy, A. Carvin on Twitter. And what I've learned in his coverage of Twitter, the Arab Spring, is that news is beginning to mimic the architecture of the net. It goes end to end, witness to world. It used to need us in the middle, otherwise it didn't happen. But in the case of Libya and Egypt and Tunisia, no one told them to crowdsource the revolution. They shared with the world what was happening around them. And Carvin, though, stood back as a journalist. Did add much journalistic value. He found out who was really there. He vetted the people. He identified who they were. He gave context. He got rid of rumors. He verified facts. He added explanations. He asked people to help him translate videos. Andy Carvin added incredible journalistic value, but the news was happening without him. And I think we have to realize now that the essential architecture of the net and the world is end-to-end, and that people can share information at a cost of nothing. So we as journalists have to ask how we add value to them. And I think that gives us an economic benefit, because we don't have to be in the middle of every exchange of information. We can now take advantage of this very cheap structure, but then add high value and not just repetitive news. That's what I tell my students.
But there's also the problem, I mean, Twitter and the news we had also accelerating the speed of news that we receive. For journalists, it's a problem, how do I verify some news that are coming to me via Twitter? I mean, a retweet or even a mass retweet doesn't mean that it's more true than anything else. So how can a journalist work and do his normal day job and also verifying all the stuff that's coming up?
Well, first, I think that's been a problem since we got 24-hour TV news. The audience had to become editors. They had to judge whether something was true yet, because there wasn't that time that we used to have built in to the journalistic process to figure out whether things we published were true. The other truth is that if you look at someone like Andy Carvin or Gawker or other places, they tweet things before they're to find out the fuller story. It says, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, what do you know? Now the frightening thing for journalists is that we are now in a position where we publish first and edit later. That sounds horrible, but it's just the way the world is operating now as you pass things on Twitter. Key skill of the journalist, I think, is not to say what we know, say what we don't know. To issue caveats and say, here's how much I really know, but here's everything I don't know, and be very clear, very transparent about that.
So that means you have to add, especially in terms when we have a crisis like we had, or like a terrorist attack like we had in Norway, or the Arab Spring, or other things, that you have to add your "it could be" phrase more to what you do, but that leaves the public a little bit alone.
But again, I think with TV, and they've always been a bit alone, and they've always judged what we have to say, and always trusted some and not trusted some. So the more open and transparent we are about our process, because the process in live news is inevitably public, the more trusted we be, and the more we can again add value. You know, I want to emphasize that we journalists are needed, but we're needed in a new way.
So that means that you pass a little bit of the way that we work with news to the public. So the public has also to decide what is right or what is wrong, and maybe give some hints to the journalists who sit on the other end to say, don't trust this source or trust this source.
Yeah, and I think it's not just journalism either. I don't mean to plug yet, but I have a new book coming out in English called Public Parts. And I might add, I have no German publisher yet, so if you know anyone. But whether you're a car company, or a newspaper, or a government, you have to operate more publicly now. It's expected. Things are going to happen in public, in front of people. We could have a whole different discussion about privacy. But in terms of just how institutions operate, I think the public will expect them to all be more public, and that means that they can judge us accordingly.
So that means the whole aspect how journalists are educated and how they are learning their job has to change.
Yes, and I think that we see tools like Twitter. Journalists learned how to promote their stories that way, how to become marketers, which is a whole new idea. They use it to report and ask people what's really going on. And here's another thing. I think that all this questions whether the article, the story, is the atomic unit of news. We'll always have articles. But if you look again to Andy Carbon, you see a process and a flow of news that never resulted, in his case, in articles. We write articles when they have value, when they add value to understanding and to summary and things like that. But sometimes news will just be a flow, and that means we have to teach the people differently how to do it.
And did the German or did the American publishers start? Did the journalists start using this new way of educating their new journalists?
Well, we certainly are at CUNY, yes, and I think that people see that. Second plug, I apologize. I think, yes, we see that. If you look, for instance, at the New York Times and The Guardian and places that I know of English that are doing brilliant jobs of live blogging. I follow the Murdoch story in the live blogs or other big stories. It's really quite wonderful. Now, out of that, again, story may appear, but it may be the byproduct. Brilliant publisher in the US named John Payton publishes Journal Register newspapers and just took over the second largest chain called Via News. Practices what he calls digital first, last. So the journalist's job is to use digital first to come forward and to tell the world digitally what they know. They will write an article for print. That's the byproduct of the true process. We have to drive our business and our audience to digital.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind words and for your expertise, and hope to see you back again next year to Republica or some other conference. Thank you.